Uh, some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm Jay Delancey, alias Vote Checker. Today is September 22nd, and this is going to be a recorded podcast. We're going to do 5 days a week, and the idea is to shoot it live stream on Facebook at 10 o'clock. That's the goal. It's 10:07. Here we go. We're almost there. And then what I'm doing, what you're watching me do, I'm actually recording a one that's more screen based on the computer that starts with yours truly on it, and then we switch to some screen share. And I just want to say we're funded by the Voter Integrity Project, and we're a non-partisan entity that believes that election fraud, that really our elections and the way elections are managed is the key to a vibrant two-party system, a republic, if you will, that is very important to our survival. And I'm sitting here trying to get the recording going, and as soon as I do, we will come on. Okay, I think we are recording. Yes. My bad. All right. Good morning. Now, what we're doing here is taking a topic per day and trying to help people understand where we're at with it. And the image for today is a unicorn because the subject is, it starts with with something the North Carolina State Board of Elections has arranged. Actually, the legislature has arranged it. It's or maybe I don't know who the guilty culprit is, but WRAL put an editorial out today. And for those of you not in North Carolina, WRAL is the television station in Raleigh. It's a very progressive station, and Raleigh is without doubt the power center of North Carolina. Not only is the legislature here, but if you get into a contest over your election and you have complaints and you go to the courts, you can't go to your local court. You have to go to Raleigh. So if you're living out in Buncombe County, say, and you decide you're going to sue over something that the election administrators did out there to steal your election from you, you have to go all the way to Raleigh to file it in court there. That means you got to pay your attorney for basically 9 hours of riding in a car if you're going to bring your own attorney. Otherwise, you got to hire a local shark suit attorney from Raleigh. So that's a concentration of power that's unbelievable that the legislature is designed into North Carolina so they can keep a tight control on it. They control Wake County judicial system. They control the entire state. And we see that played out over and over again in things like redistricting and voter ID. Last week, that was the big issue, was the voter ID, where a 3-judge panel in Wake County, you get my gist. What I want to talk about today, though, is that you saw the unicorn, because there's this new mythological beast that's reared. It's not new at all. It just rears its head. And what we're going to do is go over it and equip you so you'll understand how to explain this in a simple way that even lawmakers would understand, or that's the hope anyway. So if you would learn this and maybe do some reading, because you're not going to be able to do it just from watching the video. I'm going to show you the links on the video, and you can go to our website and get more information on it, voterintegrityproject.com, and learn all you want to learn about gerrymandering. But let's start, because WRL has teed it up, and I'm going to read to you some of their editorial. It's called Citizens Are Speaking Up to Legislators. Adopt Nonpartisan Redistricting Now. That's nonpartisan redistricting now. This is published September 22nd at WRAL.com. That's WRAL.com, and it's an opinion piece under the opinion label. I'm going to take liberty to read much of it to get you the sense of what's going on. It says that the General Assembly just completed the 8th of 13 public hearings it is conducting around the state concerning the way North Carolina's congressional and legislative voting districts will be drawn. To anyone who's attended one of these hearings or watched the video replays, the legislature's posting online after they've been completed, the scores of people testifying are sending a very clear message. The way they've done things in the past has been a mess and left hundreds of thousands of citizens without a voice in the U.S. House or the legislature. It needs to change. The time is now. And they're quoting Ann Watson from Pitt County. I do not think that the legislators should be picking their own voters. There's so many good arguments here. Another person said, we the people want to elect legislators that are loyal to our communities and not to the parties themselves. We want a democracy that is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not politicians, said Lori Yoshi Newsman of Greenville at the same meeting. All right, let's pick these things apart. This is great rhetoric. The Constitution, okay, redistricting is an ugly part of an elected government. If you want an elected government, you're going to have redistricting. So the only question is who draws the lines. And our founders decided that as ugly as it is, somebody's got to draw the lines. And whoever draws the lines controls the outcome. So you keep it public and you keep it fairly balanced, because if you do, the idea is that one side has a fighting chance at getting their way back in. And that's the way it's worked. In North Carolina, the Democrats drew heavily partisan redistricts since 1898, when they stole the state through the Wilmington coup. And throughout the Jim Crow South, they drew heavily Republican, heavily Democrat districts that kept Republicans out of government. Then the Great Migration, starting in about 1965, culminated by 1972. Jesse Helms shocked America by winning in North Carolina, a values-based Republican, not racist. It was people, oh, he's a racist. No, Jesse Helms spoke to the heart of people. He won. And that was a shot over the bow. That was a US Senate race. It was a statewide race. Redistricting didn't matter, but it was a harbinger of things to come. So in 1990, Democrats drew a heavily partisan, Democrat favored redistricting map. And by 94, it didn't matter. The Republicans won control of the legislature briefly. And then they lost it over, I won't go into it, they lost it over policy matters. And then in 2000, the Democrats had control of it again. They drew the maps again. And by 2000, I think it was 2004, it might have been 2002, Republicans won it again. And then they gave it away in a bribery scandal, and they lost it again. So they lost it. So in 2010, the Democrats had majority. They drew the maps again, and the Tea Party revolution happened. That might have been when the revolution first started, was in 2010. I don't know who controlled the legislature in 2010. Apologies. This is what happens when you do a extemporaneous speech on a lot of this. But the bottom line is by 2012, Republicans had a veto-proof majority. Yeah, so in 2010, Republicans won the majority, and they wrote the maps. And then in 2012, it was a veto-proof majority. So the state was going away from the Democrat agenda. So the desperate Democrats switched to lawfare and redistricting battles to try and get it back by demonizing what they had been doing for 80 years. So now, more than that, basically 110 years. But now it's evil because Republicans are doing it. Suddenly redistricting becomes gerrymandering. That just sounds bad. Gerrymandering. I like the sound of that. So you get these silly, vapid remarks that are just designed to emotionally manipulate people. Lori Yoshi Newsman. We the people want to elect legislators that are loyal to our communities and not to the parties themselves. Our communities, what does that mean? I would argue that means racial. But what we hear is, oh, Greenville, they'll be loyal to Greenville. They'll be loyal to Raleigh. They'll be loyal to Knightdale. They'll be loyal to Cary. That's not the way it would work. It'll all be racial. And today I'll explain why. So that's the propaganda gist. And the legislature is looking for the top cover to do this, and they're getting it. They're building these public hearings. The League of Women Voters, the editorial, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but for all the passion of the speakers, the sessions have been a showcase for civil discourse in stark contrast to the bitter, angry, disruptive displays at several recent local boards of education meetings around the state, where people are fighting for the lives of our children by not letting legislature program our children on critical race theory. But that's another issue. This is more civil because This is where Democracy NC and the League of Women Voters have packed these hearings. Let's see, Phyllis Dimko, a League of Women Voters of North Carolina board member, said she wondered if legislatures really did care about hearing from the public. She said there's been little effort to let the public know about the hearings, and little use of online social media to give people easier access to what's going on. Ms. Dimko, I guarantee you the rhinos in Raleigh are listening to you, and they're going to use this as an excuse to give you what you want, because they want this too. They want to hand the state over to one party Democrat control. This is why rhinos are so bad. Actually, they're really good until they're not. Today, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about and what you can do to combat it. Let's see, Dimko is quoted here. Though you may not be interested in what the public has to say, we're vitally interested in what you are doing, because you know that what you do now will affect what we do for the next 10 years. She scolded the legislative representatives in Alamance County last week. I don't want to make you vomit, and I don't want to swallow my own vomit here, but just see Chris Malone, a Guilford County resident who said he lives near Jamestown, put it all succinctly. Districts should be drawn so that candidates and ideas are the drivers in elections, with no influence of how the map is drawn. Look, if you draw a district that is overly Democrat, then the district next door to it is overly Republican. This is the yin and the yang of it. This is the balance. The key is, what is your priority in drawing these lines? Or are we going to lie and say it's not partisan? And that's what they want to do. They want to lie. This is what the left is good at. What they cannot win at the ballot box, they steal in the secret negotiations and in the legalese. And then today, if you stick around and watch this whole video, I will show you. If you listen to it, if you're watching on Facebook, well, okay, you get to look at me, read to you. Anyway, we'll go from there. We've got extensive coverage on this on our website over the years, but we haven't really touched these hearings yet. I do have a script I kind of need to follow here, or I'll get really confused. So let me go to that real quick, and then we'll post this up on the line later. Hearings in 2019 covered this issue, and we suggested this after Chief Justice Roberts kind of screwed everybody over, because the federal government had been really getting involved in calling the balls and strikes in this. And then you'll recall in recent history, the federal government stepped in and said, North Carolina's districts are bad right now, stop the election. And they stopped an election after the ballots already been mailed out, the filing period was over, and people were voting, and they halted the election. And a curious thing about that sham federal government involvement, that when the legislature was ordered to redraw these districts, and David Lewis redrew the districts to his next door neighbor. Literally, his next door neighbor was Renee Elmers, a U.S. congressman from Harnett County. And this just so happened that when they redrew the districts, everybody who had challenged, who was in that race challenging Elmers, including Jim Duncan, a guy who raised over $2 million for the fight, every one of those challengers had been drawn out of the new district that David Lewis drew for his good buddy, the rhino next door, Renee Elmers. So what happens? They have to call a new election. But in order to do that, like I said, there's a yin and the yang. In order to do that, they had to take 70% of the precincts from a seated congressman in the Raleigh area named George Holding. George Holding is of First Citizens Bank fame, and he was representing, I wouldn't call him a conservative, but I wouldn't call him a rhino either. He was somewhere to the right of rhino land. I'll put it this way, he'd angered rhinos enough that they took 70% of his districts to try and prop up Renee Elmers. But Holding threw him a curveball. He said, she goes, he doesn't even live in my district. He said, well, number one, when you run for Congress, you don't have to live in the district. And number two, Holding pointed back. He said, well, since she took 70% of my precincts, I think I have a legitimate reason to be in this fight. even though I'm not moving my house, my residence. So instead of playing the game, Holding admitted up front, then he beat her in a runoff, and the Rhinos were furious, but Renee Elmers was out. That's okay. She got her 6 years in, so she got her pension. She's set for life. I don't know where she is now. I would guess she's in DC somewhere, but I have no idea. Those swamp rats, man, when they go native, they go ugly native. So this was, so that's the background. And what happened, because that redistricting, they had hearings about it. And Roberts, in his, after that, the next court case that went forward, Roberts said, the federal judiciary is not involved in redistricting. They were happy to do it as a favor to Elmers. But then when it was clearly obvious that our legislature was going to win on the merits of this case they've been fighting for 10 years on redistricting. We're talking 2019 for boundaries that were drawn in 2011. So the entire 10-year cycle, the Democrats have been fighting them on it. It's just very interesting to see that. So Roberts punts and says, no, we're not going to get involved. The federal judiciary washes their hands of it. Kind of like, what's his name? Pontius Pilate. They washed their hands, all right. And what that did was allowed, it was ollie ollie and free. Oh gosh, I can't believe I hit that button. Hopefully, okay. He abandoned Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or the executive when the legislature convened against domestic violence. It's clear that our federal government has abandoned that, and we saw it last summer because of the sham, never mind, just the riots that tore the place apart, and cities and counties and states and the feds even just stepped aside and let the rioters go. So they're abandoning Article 4, Section 4. Roberts abandoned it because it says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government. Now, I'm sorry if you're triggered by the word Republican, but what that means, see, the U.S. is not a democracy. I explained this to a crowd in Cumberland last night, that we're not a democracy. We are a representative republic. See, a democracy, two wolves and a sheep vote on what to have for lunch. In a republic, there's a set of laws that everybody has to fall to or follow as much as possible. Obviously, the king will not follow it, but there is no king in America, right? Now, what we have instead, we've morphed into a governing class, and they don't follow those rules. Hillary Clinton, they don't follow those laws, and we do. The rest of us are forced to, but it should be everyone follows it. So basically, Roberts abandoned it, and what he did with that was he said, okay, we're not going to do it, but the states, you're free to do it. What he should have said was the courts are not involved in this at all. This is the legislature. That way, if the legislature overplays their hand, the voters can punish them for it. That's the original idea of our founding. Instead, what we have is I won't talk about what we have instead. Instead of limiting the state judiciaries, he said the feds will not jump in when the state judiciaries overstep their power and take over through judicial process. And in 2019, that was the game. It was judicial gerrymandering. The courts were fighting the fight. And we highlighted that with a strategery plan by a well-funded progressive group called All on the Line. And they listed 10 states they were targeting. I'll go to their webpage in a moment here, but I'm just showing a graphic of the 10 states: Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin. Funny thing about it is when they get their fair districts, those states become veto-proof majority Democrat. And the fairness will be that you look at the electoral votes there, and we are a one-party country, just like Venezuela at that point, with a veto-proof majority, and they can rewrite the Constitution all they want to. They can outlaw the Second Amendment. They can outlaw the First Amendment. Well, they kind of already have, but never mind. The fact that you're hearing me says maybe they haven't. But anyway, Okay, this web page, this link I give you now, it's on my website, and the next one is the All on the Line. It's linked in the article. This is who they are. This is Mark Elias, whom we affectionately call Beelzebub, and Eric Holder, who's helping raise the money for this, and Mark does the fight. This lays out their strategy, allontheline.org. They want you to get involved. The time to act is now. It's just all rhetoric to get people uber excited, and they play the race card and the youth card. This is what all the progressives are doing. It has a quote from Obama: because of all the hard-fought progress we achieved together, the lack of truly representative government has too often stood in the way of change. See, truly representative means the wolves have control of the government and they can eat the lambs. And that's what happened in Venezuela. They banned, the first thing they did, one of the first things they did was banned rental property. They banned people. They said, if you own rental property, you have to collect your rent from the government. We will pay it. And they told the tenants, don't pay your rent anymore. We will pay it for you. So Chavez robbed their treasury and started giving, just like TRICARE, they pay the doctors, 25 cents on the dollar, or billable out a dollar. It's maybe not 25 cents, but they bill at less, they pay at less than what the doctors want. And they stop the doctors from going to the patient. And what you get is the doctors are now working for the state, and they want the property owners to now work for the state. And ultimately, they want everyone to work for the state and then just have one big equal family. Well, that's their pitch anyway, but we know what equality is. It's equality for me, but not for thee. And they list their priority states, and it's just clear what they're doing. It's all about just taking partisan control. And they use words like fair. Eric Holder said, with fair maps and a more just electoral system, we can have leaders who are more likely to tackle the important issues facing our country and be more responsive to the needs and desires of the people they elected to represent, or they were elected to represent. So what does that mean? No more guns, no more Republicans. I mean, basically, that's what that means. It means no more two-party system. It means we can do away with our opposition. We can silence them. We can put them in concentration camps like they do in Australia now. Hey, elections have consequences, right? And that's democracy. This is not alcohol, but here's to democracy, right? Okay, that's their plan. All on the line. They lay it out for you, and all these links will be at our website, voterintegrityproject.com, and you click on the menu bar. It says daily podcast, and you'll see these notes up there shortly after I do this this podcast for you people listening to it or watching on Facebook. Okay, the next slide shows the pushback on all this. I've shown you the rhetoric. Now, what do we do? How do we fight this? I have a page that has a lot of links to some research that blows up the myth of nonpartisan redistricting, because it is a unicorn. There is no such thing as nonpartisan redistricting. It is all a ruse. We'll get rid of the partisan side and we'll focus on something else. I wonder what that something would be if it's not partisan. What predicts voting patterns more than anything else? Maybe demographics? Okay, yeah. So white males, bad. They're probably the ones who voted for Trump. And I'm stereotyping big time, but this is what it's all about, and I'll prove it to you in a moment if you bear with me. And that is that they're going to group everything into tribes, into racial tribes. That way they can manipulate the tribes and play racist tricks to disenfranchise what used to be, what kind of still is, the majority of this country, which is white people. I hate to say it's all about race, but that's what they're doing to us, is dividing it along racial lines. Divide and conquer. Hey, Marx is not dead. So this research blows up the myth, and I'm going to go over some of it. First off is the Capital Research Center. They they take a highbrow approach to it. It's capitalresearch.org. They do great work. Don't get me wrong. It's a fairly long. It's a June 22nd, 2019 article, and they do. It's very heady material. If you're a scholar out there, consider yourself a thinker. I recommend you pull it down and read it and get past the emotional rhetoric of the other side. And basically, they prove just through statistical analysis. I mean, just looking at it and peeling it apart on where we have these nonpartisan redistricting commissions or independently drawn redistricting commissions. The word independent is baloney. It's all about the criteria. He who writes the rules rules the roost in this case. And when they write the rules for those independent commissions, that's what you have to pay attention to. Independent is just a word to fool you into voting for it, and you will. There'll be enough stupid people out there where they'll key on those godly words like independent and nonpartisan, and they'll vote for it. And I can prove that by looking at the stupid people in Virginia. Sorry, I got some friends in Virginia, but as a mass, y'all did some stupid stuff. Okay, the CRC said even independently drawn districts tend to favor one party over another. Now that's a highbrow approach. And then a very surprising situation, a left-leaning, we'll say, I'll be polite, left-leaning group called ProPublica wrote a very revealing article that I'm surprised they wrote. Olga Pierce and Jeff Larson in 2011 wrote this. I reached out to them and tried to, I had some questions for them and reached out to them when I discovered this. I couldn't believe it when a highly placed insider at the North Carolina House of Representatives told me about this article, because the leadership of the House had screwed us over, and I'll show you how in a minute. But anyway, this was an article written in 2011, and it talks about what they did in California. It is a fabulous article. I recommend you read it, reread it, print it off, highlight it, teach your neighbors about it, and then take your neighbors and go see your local lawmaker and say, you're not doing this. And I'll tell you what the message is in reply, but this is critical. What the Californians did, they ran a plebiscite, or I'm sorry, that's a highfalutin word, for they had an election to implement these nonpartisan redistricting commissions. And what they did was decided, I'm not going to read this article to you, there's way too much. I'll give you the results to it. The Democrat Congressional Committee or Campaign Committee, they looked at the rules and they strategized, and they could not believe their success. So statewide, Democrats have been expected to gain at most a seat or two as a result of redistricting. But an internal party projection says that the Democrats will likely pick up 6 or 7 seats in the state where the party's voter registration have grown only marginally. Very little of this is due to demographic shifts, said Professor Doug Johnson, a fellow at the Rose Institute in Los Angeles. Republican areas actually had higher growth than Democrat ones. By the numbers, Republicans should have held at least the same number of seats, but they lost big. I'm trying to get to the numbers here because it's been a while since I've read it, and I forgot. It was incredible, and it's only gotten worse for the Republicans since then. I think it's 7 seats that they picked up, and no fewer than 35 Democrat politicians, including minority leader Nancy Pelosi and their allies, spent a total of $7 million to campaign against the proposition. And surprisingly, once they got it, they began organizing to influence the commission that they opposed, and it worked. They did an amazing thing. They had highly partisan political activists testifying at these local hearings, claiming to be just regular citizens. And they complained about the represented interests of this group or that group was being underrepresented, and we're going to sue you because you're racist for not favoring our racial group. Bottom line to it is, I could go on way too long in this article, and this is already a fairly long podcast, and I really appreciate you listening. What they did was they said, either you draw these districts along racial lines, or we will sue you for being a racist. And they define racism in one way, that if you don't give minorities what they want, whatever that minority is, any minority, if you don't give them what they want, then you're a racist. But if they want to do something racially against anybody, it's not racist, because the academics have redefined it, kind of like sex and gender. The academics have redefined racism as a power term. And the traditional power is white, therefore anything you do against the majority is not racism after all, because they're white. And this is a very bad rationale for public policy. It pits one group against the other. Oh, I'm not doing you justice here today on this ProPublica article. Rather than give you the wrong number, I think it was 7 seats they picked up, and they were totally stunned by the amount. It's a lengthy article, and I really like it and recommend you read it carefully, because the impact they achieved, the Democrats achieved beyond their wildest imagination. Let me give you an example. They actually had somebody, there was an area, it was divided by a mountain range, this area they wanted drawn, that what it had, there were 2 groups, racially unified. I don't remember what race, it might have been Hispanic or Black or Indian or something, but there were 2 groups that were drawn over that range. There were no roads. It took about 2 hours to get from one side to the other, because you had to go around the range. And with a straight face, somebody walked in and told the commission that the unifying factor for that district was that it was the commuting route for the California Condor. And the commission goes, okay, yes. And they drew the district that way. Stupid as that is. Another example, they said you cannot discriminate against race. Sanchez, Loretta Sanchez, the first Hispanic in Orange County, who was Bob Dornan was defeated by her, and the rhinos hated Bob Dornan, so Newt Gingrich didn't lift a finger for Dornan, and Dornan swore that he was beaten by illegal immigrants who were voting, non-citizens who were voting, and he could prove it, and he did. He got it down to about 500, and he had about 3,000 on a list. He needed about 500 more votes, and Sanchez would have been not the congressman. Dornan would have gotten the seat, but he needed the INS, as they called them at the time, to confirm the citizenship or non-citizenship of these 3,000 people that Dornan had identified as people who voted. Instead, what happened, Gingrich turned a blind eye to it. INS did nothing, and Gingrich seated Sanchez. Now, fast forward to this redistricting commission. Sanchez is in trouble, because when you follow their racial criteria, you had a large Vietnamese community that had been evacuated out of Vietnam. They were loyal to America, and they hated communism, and they lived in Orange County. So we got a problem here, Houston, because if we draw this thing to favor these Vietnamese, we're going to have a Republican district through this redistricting, this nonpartisan redistricting commission. So instead, what they did, the Hispanics, Sanchez's people, all showed up at the hearings. The Vietnamese were in the dark. They were working. They were out doing what Republicans tend to do, which is work and make a living instead of worrying about politics. So what happened, as Mark Keith Robinson, our lieutenant governor, says, either you do politics or politics will do you. And in this case, politics did the Vietnamese guys. So while it was considered very bad, very evil to split a racial group, to draw 2 precincts or draw 2 districts that split a racial group. In this case, in order for Sanchez's Hispanic group to get their majority, they had to split the Vietnamese group. They call it cracking and packing. In this case, they cracked the Vietnamese group, and they packed all the Hispanics into one group to get them another district. That's the way it works. Then it becomes, which racial group has the most political power? And we know it's the Democrat groups. So then it becomes, they draw these lines for Democrats. And then as an added bonus, this is what fooled Virginia. I may have lost a good friend over this, and I'm sorry, but they were stupid not knowing this. The litigation, see, the whole driving for this nonpartisan from the legislature side, which is why they're having these hearings, is because Tim Moore and Phil Berger are sick of seeing their name as listed as defendants in lawsuits. That's what it comes down to. Politicians do not like to be sued. And the left is, okay, they understand that, and they come after these guys in that way. They sue them. So now what the politicians want to do is outsource the redistricting to a commission. They can say, I'm a good guy. I'm just elected here to serve the people. Oh, you don't like the maps that are drawn? Don't sue me, sue the commission. See, the difference is the legislature has all the money in Mordor. They have all the money they need to defend themselves in lawsuits. But the commission gets funded a certain amount of money from the legislature. And in California, what happened was the commission ran out of money. They got sued, they got sued, they got sued. They went bankrupt. They had no budget, and they had to basically just let the left write the district. They just caved and let the bad guys write whatever they wanted. So what do you have? You've got a huge advantage for Democrat in Congress in California, a big delegation swing there. And then you've got, even at the state house, you got veto-proof majorities in both houses. Once in a while, they get it to one Republican senator more than they need to stop the veto, and then the Democrats pour all their resources in it. And the voter fraud is amazing there. The magic movers that come into your county actually don't need to. They get so many people on the voter rolls that activists just come in from across the state and vote those people on the voter rolls in that county. I'm not making that up. This is well documented by our good friends in California, the Election Integrity Project of California, which has been doing this longer than I have in North Carolina. I started in 2011. They started in 2009, I believe, and they really know their stuff, and they've been their laws are much more friendly to allowing observers at the polls, so they're able to document this better than we can in North Carolina, because the Democrats and Republicans collude to control the observer process. But we'll save that for another day. Right now, this California article, if you read it and study it, you will understand exactly what the playbook is in North Carolina. The lawfare they're using, and now the rhetoric from Channel 5 and all these public hearings, and then you'll get Speaker Moore going up there saying, well, the public demanded it. No, the problem was the rest of us had jobs or trying to work, and we didn't go to these hearings. Shame on us, right? You could go to those hearings if you have them in your town, but you better study up quick. They're doing them right now. And apologies for us not seeing this coming, but there's only so much we can do. And we'd still like to see an audit, but I don't have to beat that horse every day. The redistricting is a topic today, and that's our problem with this, is the ProPublica plan. If you look at one link and all the links I give you today, look at the ProPublica article on our website under podcasts, under daily podcasts. Look at that article, study it, print it, read it, highlight it, teach it. It's what they're doing. Now, going from there, I'll show you how these people, we've already caved on, our legislature has already caved. They sent a trial balloon. I noticed this October 24th in 2019, where suddenly I was watching the goings on of a legislative committee on redistricting and something like that, one of the House or Senate committees on election law, and something popped up. It was a new device, a new document that had been added, that someone on the committee requested that bill drafting, not bill drafting, that I guess the bill drafting section, they produced a bill summary. That's what it's called, a bill summary. I have a link to that bill summary on this page. The article was, the link, it says Voter Integrity Project / The Last Battle, with hyphens between each of those words, The Last Battle. And this is, voterintegrityproject.com / the-last-battle. And it shows, it was House Bill 140 from the 2018-2019 session. It said, no district shall be drawn for the purpose of favoring a political party, incumbent legislator, or member of Congress, or other person or group, or for the purpose of augmenting or diluting the voting strength of a language or racial minority group. Well, there you have it, right there. So it sounds so good. It will not be political, nor will it dilute the power of a racial or language minority group. So if you're not, what they're saying is we will dilute based on purposes of favoring a political party, incumbent legislator, member of Congress, or other person or group, but it will not dilute language or racial minority groups. Think about that. So what that means is, once they get that in the law, it will allow them to strictly, it'll be their order to dilute everybody else to get their racial groups. We're already seeing this played out at the county level. You ought to go to your county commission hearings. I got a report in one county where the employee, the little bureaucrat, a smarmy little Democrat who, that's it. By the way, we approach this as nonpartisan, but I'm sorry, I have partisan feelings about this. But the little Democrat bureaucrat who worked in that county drew the maps, didn't even report the partisan, as if this were already the law. He wrote the maps in that county to pay attention to language and racial minority groups. Now, what that meant was he drew one district that had hardly any voters at all in it. But had a lot of people in it. A lot of people who are not voters. Oh, they're a language or a racial minority group. That's where the non-voting, how do I put this politely? The undocumented immigrants all live. So you create a district that has a large amount of people in it who don't vote and who are of one racial minority. Gee, I wonder what happens as their children become anchor babies and become 18 and get to vote. And I wonder what happens as there's as the the winds of change happen here, and well, bottom line is it's a Democrat district. That county has a Republican majority county commissions. When drawn on partisan lines, it's fairly balanced, so it's really close. It's like 4-3. And so what happens now, it becomes 5-2 or 4-3 Democrat. It was 4-3 Republican, and now it becomes 4-3 Democrat because of the way the lines are drawn. And they're not even, the little bureaucrat didn't even mention the partisan breakdown of these districts. It's like, oh, I didn't look at that because you didn't ask me to. And the majority Republican commission didn't ask for that. And that's a frustrating thing when your county commission is in on the fix too. There are rhinos in our midst. They must be hunted down and removed from power. This is a sign of a rhino. They're letting the Democrats get away with this. So that's another sign as we talk about the audits. Now, House Bill 140 did that. I mean, it wrote that clearly right there in the language. We're not going to pay attention to partisan, but we're going to pay extra special attention to language and racial groups. There you go, ballgame. That is nonpartisan. What that means is they want to have racial gerrymandering instead of partisan gerrymandering. That's all that means. And if they do racial gerrymandering, it'll take, I'm thinking maybe 50 years, but probably 70 years to bring sanity back to America. If you do that in enough states where it becomes a one-party state. Now, at this point in life, a one-party state would be Democrat. Now, maybe in the past it was Republican. I don't know. I can't think of when it was. But anyway, I see the danger in this, and we see it clearly. It's California, a one world country, a third world country over there. I think President Trump had a different term for it. Now, the Virginia story, I have that linked on our website. By the way, on our site, if you go to the homepage, voterintegrityproject.com, right under the flag, there's a little search block. Type in the word redistricting, and you can read all kinds of articles about it. Now, I don't just write opinion pieces in this. I generally put links in there. So if you want to learn more about it, you can look at my links and see if oh, that guy's a liar or he's crazy. I actually approach it from a researcher perspective. So, you can call me what you want to, but that's my angle on it. And you can look at it and go, okay, all right, make up your own mind. Don't just hear my words. Now, the Virginia article, I wanted to, we did highlight it. I was so upset when I saw it because I got good friends up there and they voted on it. And what they were saying was they just didn't think about the litigation aspect of it, but the litigation aspect See, they're kind of in a minority there. The Republicans are kind of in a minority. So the way they were sold was, hey, we can sue the commission. We can sue them, and we're going to sue our way back into power. But they don't understand that the Democrats are way ahead of them because they wrote the playbook in California. And then what you're having is the California plan has been exported to other states because it worked so swimmingly well in California. That's the way it works. Each state is a petri dish, and they figure out what works, and they spread that virus to the rest of us. Sound familiar? I won't go there. Let's see. I think that's about it. The Virginia plan was bad. Unicorns. Yeah, there's my little unicorn friend. And that's kind of it. So what is the takeaway for you? I'll have this in my program notes on the website. But here's the talking points. You know, this is pretty depressing when you just hear what I had to say and you go, the day I start doing that, just depressing you, I'm going to quit doing this. I see no reason to get on here and depress you. I'm not Glenn Beck, you know. I'm going to actually give you a way out of this instead of just wear you down. In fairness to Glenn, he does great things, but that's an inside joke. One of my friends who he gives me a hard time because I'm rough on Glenn. But our answer, see, nonpartisan gerrymandering or nonpartisan redistricting, it's code for racial gerrymandering. And if you don't believe me, you can look at the actual wording of their proposed laws, like North Carolina's House Bill 140 from last session, or the ProPublica article, which lays out in just excruciating detail exactly how they did it, how it worked out. Nonpartisan redistricting, it's the left's latest ruse to fool the masses and let them steal a country they clearly cannot win in a fairly held election contest. I have a typo here in my notes. It says they cannot lose, but they cannot win it in a fairly held contest. Well, if anyone thinks that what we had in 2020 was fairly held, yeah, we'll save that for another day. But in a fair fight, Americans lean to the right. We lean toward God and country, and we cling to our Bibles and our guns. You know, we're bitter clingers, as dear leader Obama called it. Okay, their reasoning, the left's reasoning goes that if you don't make redistricting all about race, then you're a racist. They're so contradictory, they should be laughed at. Instead, we're letting them get away with this because our legislature, they don't want to be sued. So they need to they need to own up to their constitutional duties, set racially blind partisan maps, and fight the courts as if their lives depend on it. Wait, it's not their lives that depend on it, it's ours. And this is our problem. They don't care, we do. If you care about your representative republic, if you care about your freedom, then the words of Ronald Reagan come into mind that every failure, every fight for our freedom tyranny is one generation away. And this is where we're at. Either you go out and fight this battle, it's another distraction. We need an audit, we need redistricting to be contained. Either you fight that or it will blow us over. And this is what we need to do today, is call your lawmakers and give them your opinion on this, but it's racial gerrymandering versus partisan gerrymandering. At least with partisan, there's balance. With racial, we see in California, there is no balance. It becomes just a lawfare game among racial groups. And the ones that win are the ones that have the highest representation in the political class, i.e. Democrats. The ones that lose are the ones that are represented by Republicans, because classic Republicans, they're out doing their work, they're out making money to make this economy go, while the Democrats are figuring out ways to steal that money. So that's it. All right, I guess I have to close on the video by saying, while you're on our website searching for redistricting, you might go right above that. We have a contribute block that'll put you onto our funding site. We are 501c4 at Voter Integrity Project. So we talk a good nonpartisan game, but we're allowed to be as partisan as we want to be. I don't want to be partisan. I want to be issue driven, which is, no, there's limitations on how partisan we could be. I'm not a lawyer, but we are issue driven, where election integrity is our issue. and we live hand to mouth on the kindness of strangers. So if you'd be maybe strange and put some money in our pocket, and I will truthfully say that none of this money has ever gone to pay my salary, or we'd like to pay the salary of a staffer if we could get monthly contributions, enough of them of $5 or $10 a month. We'd like to pay an administrative slash someone to help us run the trains on time for doing things like mailings, because people complain to me they don't hear from me enough email wise. It takes time. We got volunteers all across the state, but I need to pay someone to do that, and we could use your help in that regard. So check us out, voterintegrityproject.com. We've been fighting this issue since 2011, and we would like to continue doing it. With your help, we will. That's it. Have a blessed day. And my video podcast has stopped, and now we're going to do a really cheesy transition as I say goodbye to our Facebook fans. And remember the unicorn. When you think redistricting, nonpartisan redistricting, just remember the unicorn.